All right, so not sure if you guys remember what my topic was, but from a strength and conditioning standpoint, I wanted to look at athlete self-reporting measures and kind of get perceptions of what coaches are interpreting and what strength and conditioning and athletic trainers are kind of looking at. So I guess we'll first define an athlete self-reported measure is basically a term used to describe any measure where an athlete self-reports their subjective, physical, psychological, or social well-being. It may include scales of psychometric properties, a checklist of symptoms, a questionnaire, a diary, or a log, all related back to their basically feeling of well-being. Right now, there's a substantial amount of literature coming out of Australia and the UK demonstrating the potential value of subjective measures to monitor the athlete training response. Subjective signs and symptoms include mood disturbances, stress, and behavioral symptoms. And they have been shown to respond in a dose-response manner with training load, and also have been shown to enable the early detection of athletes who may be responding negatively to the training with regards to the likelihood of injury or illness. The use of the athlete self-reporting measures suggests that changes in subjective well-being reflect the training process. So a decrease in subjective well-being suggests that the athlete is under a new stress or approaching a cumulative workload that may be detrimental. And an increase in well-being suggests that they're recovering well enough from the stressors being applied. So with that said, I definitely want to look at how the self-reported measures are utilized and regarded by sport coaches, strength conditioning coaches, and athletic trainers in American college athletics. The majority of all these studies have been in high performance models based out of the UK and Australia, and there hasn't been any research published on how American college athletes are responding to these things. So that's basically the significance of this inquiry here, and just want to look at how these measures are perceived by the American coaches. I know here at Campbell we're not using them very often, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But throughout the training process, the body undergoes a number of stressors, and how the athlete responds is directly related to their physical well-being. So to attempt to address the stress management, athlete monitoring started. And it's a necessary means to objectively identify progress and detect any negative physiological or psychological occurrences that accumulate because of overreaching or overtraining during the process. High performance sport programs have invested a great deal of human and financial resources in attempts to gain a competitive advantage and limit the negative effects of overtraining. So basically, my research questions are: what is the utility of employing subjective athlete self-reported measures in addressing internal player workload? The second one is: what are the benefits and negative consequences of implementing a athlete self-reporting measure? And the third one is: to what extent do athlete self-reporting measures alter programming of training or practice? So basically, that's kind of the background on it, and there's so with regards to how we're going to utilize or look into this. So I've moved into a different role, but both of my former assistants utilize athlete self-monitoring, self-reporting measures, and the strength coaches at NC State are also utilizing those. So we will be looking at that, but I'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to the methods. But conceptual framework, going to use a grounded theory approach. Using this method, I can gather information from coaches and staff to identify themes and develop an overarching theory from the prospective coaches and staffs. With that, we'll be able to. There's not a theory associated with the grounded theory, so there's no real framework required. So after that, we'll just look at. Sorry, lost it. Anyway. Okay, so back to the grounded theory. Basically, we take survey questions, go through an interview process, and ask the people that we're interviewing a number of questions, and use a code to take out the major key points in each person's response. Through this coding, we'll be able to change that into kind of almost a quantitative method to show some overarching theories and the way things kind of shake out with regards to how individual coaches and athletic trainers and strength coaches perceive these measures, and if it's a worthwhile utility for them in that regard. So with methods, like I said, I'll be using strength and conditioning coaches, 2 of them from Campbell University, our head women's soccer coach who utilizes these athlete self-reported measures, our assistant track coach who keeps track of that stuff, and the director of Olympic sports from NC State, who I know has been doing this stuff for a long time, and has a lot of caught up data, and utilizes stuff a lot. So basically, we'll do a semi-structured interview. We'll record it and transcribe it, analyze it using Qualtrics, and like I said, go through the coding process, which I'm still trying to basically figure out how we're going to go about all that. For me, I'll be a non-participant observer, reach out to these colleagues and engage their interest, and then basically a little bit of my background into my positionality. I've tried to use ARSMs before as a strength coach with a football team, and that was a terrible undertaking. And I think a lot of that was the lack of education for the student athletes on the importance and how it can help us with the training plan to alter things alter training for the student athletes. So it didn't really work out in that regard. I think there's been a number of times in the literature where the education piece has shown that if the student athlete understands what's going on a little bit better, they can they put a little bit more into it. So that's kind of that. This study has sort of been done in Australia in 2012, and they utilized physios, so PTs or athletic trainers, sport coaches, and athletes from a high-level organization. That was from Saw, Maine, and Gaston. And after after they got their results, they found that there was a 4-step process that included recording the data, reviewing the data, contextualizing the data, and acting on the data. They knew that going into it, but the research showed that's how it's most effectively implemented. So anytime that there was a buildup of negative outcomes, they were able to adjust their training accordingly. They also showed that data had to be done, that had to be analyzed in a pretty expedient fashion, just to keep engagement up. If you're recording this data and you don't get it back for, as an athlete, if you don't get it back for a week, then you're not going to be engaged. If it's pretty quick on the turnaround with regards to the athletes, it increases their engagement, and it helps the coach plan for their next practices and training. So the next steps here are to continue to work on methodology, clarify the questions that I'm going to ask, to align them with the research questions. So obviously the 3 research questions are there to expand on those, to gain a little bit more insight on those perceptions from the coaches. Then next step is to expand on the coding and gain a further understanding of the meaning units as it relates to the research questions, and then begin the initial stages of recruitment of the participants. And like it said not to alert anybody until we're ready to go. So no one really knows that I'm looking into this, but hopefully we can figure something out and get everybody on board pretty quickly. So yeah, that's kind of where it is right now. So try to go fast to get through it.
Would you agree that it's important to investigate perceptions and just any sort of subjective measure, because what the athletes feel is real, at least to them? Maybe they could be over-reporting how they feel about something on a subjective measure, which might be one of the reasons why they're not used as much, maybe.
No, sorry.
But if that's the way that they feel, then it's real enough to them, and it's going to affect their performance. That's
true. That's definitely true. But yeah, so I mean, there's definitely a psychosomatic aspect there that if they think it's super hard and they go through it and they're trudging through it, it's going to affect their performance for sure. But like I said, the educating them on the utility of the ASRM and how that we as coaches use those to change practice, I think really will kind of change that and hopefully get them to understand that how important it is to their training.
What are reasons coaches give that they don't use these type of measures?
One, it's the legitimacy of how the athlete is reporting. I've seen a coach go to somebody and everything is a 3. Like, how hard is this? 3, 3, 3. And the athlete just doesn't understand that, there's something that has to go back into it. And also the amount of work on the front end to collect the data. It's not hard necessarily, but it's time consuming, and it's time consuming to go back and look at it and analyze. And you know, as coaches, we weren't really brought up on these sort of sports science methods. You know, we kind of just went and did, and you know, figured it out from there, using the coach's eye. But the use of the subjective measures, you know, especially in the research, is very, very, very strong, correlating to, you know, levels of you know, general well-being.
Greg, do you have anything? Because I have one more question.
Yeah. I was just curious. So generally these are like taken after practice type. You have a practice, there's a few questions or something that they're rating their perception of the practice and how they feel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there's a couple different ways that people do it. So my goal is not to do the actual testing and finding out how the kids are doing. There is, you know, there can be too much of this, so it doesn't have to necessarily be done every day. Maybe it's a once every couple days, just to see how they're doing. Also, another way is to just to find out RPEs, or ratings of perceived exertion, after each drill. So I know that our soccer team does that. So after every single drill, or series of drills, they, you know, go up to the manager and tell them, you know, 1 through 10 how hard that was, and go from there. So there's a couple different ways that coaches are utilizing this, but sometimes one thing, I was out at a Big Ten school, and I saw the intern just going through, asking, you know, the players individual questions every single day, and it wasn't worth it. The guys definitely didn't see the benefit of it, and it was just like, yeah, 3, whatever, 5, you know, this is just whatever. So
I could see that being tedious, and I could see the players at some point just being like, yeah, whatever. Yeah, I'm a 3. Yeah, I'm going to have to practice anyway.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So a lot of the research has been, you know, once every 2 or 3 days, depending on you know, the amount of data that they need. Teresa, last one.
You mentioned that you're going to use purposeful sampling of the coaches and other professionals that use subjective measures. Have you thought about including people who don't, to kind of understand more about why they don't?
No.
I know you mentioned a couple of reasons, but
yeah, no, I didn't even think about that. That's definitely something worth looking into, and you know, just trying to figure out why people don't do it, for sure.
It sounds good. I mean, it's curious. Like you know, heard about some of these things. Like you said, a lot of it's elite athletes and overseas, and we're kind of behind on that. So curious to see where it goes.
Yep.
All right.
Cool. All right.
Okay.
Thanks. Let's stop this one.
I'm up now.